one woman we called the witch, and she was absolutely horrible. She hated Germans, she hated Jews. She wasn't quite right up there, you know. And she never gave us our rations. She always ate our rations. Yes. So we were always hungry, cold and hungry. And we complained bitterly to my parents. And they said, well, look, there isn't another vacancy. And we just said, we're not going to stay here. I mean, whatever you say, you know, you go and complain to the headmistress. We couldn't do that. We were too young, and headmistress was very much sort of, you know. And so Nina went to the headmistress and didn't complain, but said we weren't very happy there and this and that and the other. And she said, oh, but she's such a nice woman. She was a great hypocrite. She always went to church on Sundays and, you know, asked the vicar for lunch. And, oh, yes, on one occasion, she asked the vicar for lunch, and she said to us before, now, I'm going to ask you if you want a second helping, but don't you dare say yes. But we did. We said yes. What could she do in front of the vicar? They were so utterly different from us, you know. I mean, there was nothing, there was no music anywhere, there was no... they just lived in a different world. The English people did, you know, and especially in the country. They never met, I mean, most of them never met a Jewish person in their life. And so, and the man there, he was an accountant, elderly accountant, and he quite liked Eva, actually. He quite took a shine to her. But on the other hand, you had to be seen or not heard. And I still always see this picture of him reading the Times at breakfast like that, and not a word spoken. And occasionally Eva would make a little quiet remark, and he'd say, chatterbox, lower the Times. So chatterbox. And she'd shut up immediately, and up came the Times again, you see. I mean, it was that we were used to talking to each other at breakfast, you know. They had grown-up children, and unfortunately their eldest son, who was in the Air Force, got shot down and killed over Malta while we were there. And of course, they just told us once, but you weren't allowed to ever mention it again. You know, it was, things were not talked about. Nasty, bad things weren't talked about. England was a very different place then. Now everything is so free and easy, and you can do whatever you like, and there's so many different faces around, you know. But it wasn't like that then. It was very rigid, and people never showed any feeling, hence chatterbox, you know. But that was typical. You never showed any feelings. Men were absolutely like this. It was only French and foreigners and Italians who waved their hands about, you see. While she was at St. Martin's, went to America 3 times to work for the summer holidays. They have very long summer holidays. She earned the money to go there, and she got the tickets and did everything herself, although she was 17, you know, and it wasn't that easy like it's now. But she was pretty competent. That widened her horizon a lot, because she saw a different world, and she went to Harlem, and it completely changed her outlook on life. And she came back also, she came back, I say that in the book where I wrote the introduction, she came back singing the blues and singing Yiddish songs and American folk songs and everything. You know, it was much more open, much more going on. There was a great demand at that time for people who would work for little money in the sort of sweatshops of London, which was, in her case, Lyons Corner House. There was one of the very big ones at near Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus. I think there were 5 floors. And it employed all people from all over the world. A lot of them were students. They just came for 3 months to look at London and and they're living that way, or all kinds of different people, you know. That was the time of the Windrush, and they thought the London was paved with gold, you know. They had little idea of what it was really like. And so Eva, of course, helped them, you know, especially that's one of those on the picture there, was she met at Lyons Corner House, who had arrived with no warm clothes in the winter and pregnant. And so she got her some clothes and she got her onto a GP and got her organized, generally speaking. And she looked after her, you know, for years. Yes, I mean, I knew her quite well. She was living with this man who's standing there, who's the father of that child. But they didn't marry, of course. I mean, he was a character. I mean, he was extremely charming, and nobody could resist him. I mean, he could charm the birds off the trees, you know. He was a real womanizer. And what's more, the money that she earned, he spent on horses and always lost. And she had 2 children by him, and then she kicked him out because she decided enough was enough, you know. But Eva helped her with everything, you know, helped her through the pregnancies and all. Whenever she needed, Eva was there to sort her out. She went to live in this grotty place in Whitechapel, when she could have been at home, you know, in Hampstead. But she wanted to be independent. She didn't want to have to explain every time she went out whom she went out with and what she was doing. And by that time, she wanted to live her own life, understandably. So, but obviously it had to be something she could afford on the salary at Lyons Corner House, which wasn't very much. But at least she got one good meal a day there. I mean, they gave them one really properly cooked meal, because otherwise I don't know what would have happened. She went for a little bit to the docks and painted there, and worked there at Tate and Lyle. And she became a trade unionist and tried to help people, and the drawings are very good from that period, the dockers. When she had enough of that, she decided she had to get out, and she hated the English winter, the greys and the drizzle, and she liked sun and shadows and, you know, warmth. She was really Mediterranean by nature. And so she decided, she was invited to come to Israel to stay with friends, and we had a lot of relatives there as well, who'd come from Germany, and they were all keen to look after her and everything. She was very popular, you know. So she stopped off at Mykonos, and she wrote a letter to my father saying, I'm now on Mykonos, I could stay here forever because it's so wonderful, you know. And it is like the place where Ulysses' sailors stopped at the lotus flower. So, you know, she visualized all these things always. But she couldn't stay there. She had to go on she had a ticket for Israel. So, but she went via Naples, where she went through all the slums and painted and everything. Well, in some ways, she thought it was wonderful because of the landscapes and the light and the, you know, all that, and the history and but in other ways, she hated the fact they were very militaristic at that time. And she said, why, when you start again, carry on in the same sort of way? You know, it's absolutely terrible. She went to the labor exchange, and they just shouted at her and didn't give her any work. I mean, what she called shouting. She was very oversensitive, you know, to the way they. But she said all the others got the same treatment, but they didn't seem to mind. You know? But she was very depressed because she couldn't see which way her life would go. She applied to the London School of Economics to become a social worker. And that would have been a complete disaster, you know, because that's all very rigid, you know, it's all very regulated, and you've got to do this and got to do that, and it wouldn't have worked with her sort of way of looking after people at all. But okay, she had to write an essay why she wanted to be a social worker, which she did, and she got a place. They offered her a place, but that was arrived just after she committed suicide. But I think it wouldn't have worked anyway. I mean, that was completely crazy. But it showed she was looking for a new start, you know, a different way of being with people. You never get over that kind of thing. You learn to live with it, and that's all you can do, you know. And then, once I finished full-time work, I decided I'll deal with her paintings. I will make them known to the world, because that's all that's left, you know, of her. And I think they're so good that if I put enough energy in, I might be able to persuade the general public that. And so I started making this book and getting all the odd work, but it worked. I mean, very often it's the faces she was most interested in. Sometimes, quite often, after she'd finished with the face, more or less, she lost interest. I mean, hands, for instance, they're just sort of, you know, this at the last moment, because you have to have something there. Her type of work doesn't appeal to everybody. It needs a certain type of person, you know, to really appreciate what she could do. Later on, when she had an exhibition, one of the critics who came to see it wrote, how is it that I've never heard of Eva Frankfurther before, because her work is so good, but it does not surprise me to read in the literature about the exhibition that she comes from Germany as a child, because her style is so obviously part of the German expressionism. But that always amazed me, that that should be so, because she was 9 when she left there. She wasn't interested just in the style for the style's sake. She was interested in showing, and always the underdog. It's a big shock to go from being very comfortably off in an environment where everybody is comfortably on, and suddenly to have nothing, literally nothing, you know. It is something that changes you completely.